This podcast was recorded on December 10th, 2017. By the time you hear it, things may have changed. Welcome to Black Women Talk Politics. I am Sabrina Williams.
I'm Sheila Strain-Clark.
I'm happy to be back. I missed you guys.
Oh.
The holidays get crazy.
It does. It does.
Starting
I
from
can't
Thanksgiving.
believe that we're 2 weeks away from Christmas now, which kind of seems impossible. Seems like Thanksgiving was yesterday.
It does. I still.
And, I always think about after Thanksgiving, you're like, oh, we still have like 4 weeks till Christmas, and then it feels like 2 days.
2 days. 2 days. I'm trying to get Christmas cards out. It's just nuts.
Yeah.
And we've, officially been in the, alternative world of Donald Trump for, over a year now. And things just seem to be turned. I mean, I guess we're still turned on our ear, right? And we're dealing with the Mueller FBI probe and all this stuff that is happening. But I found interesting with the Mueller probe this week, besides now the Republicans trying to discredit the FBI as a whole, is that George Papadopoulos' girlfriend was on ABC with George Stephanopoulos, which is funny, she's like, hey, he was not this low-level guy. He was actually, not the coffee runner. He did talk to Flynn. He did talk to Bannon. So she was dropping big names, discrediting, the White House's claim that, this guy was just sort of like the paperboy. He was nobody who was trying to, get up the ladder when it seems like he was at the top of the ladder with everybody else. So in lieu of that...
Right, of course they're going to try to make it seem like he was no one.
Right.
But we don't even know him.
Everyone is someone, right? And so so because of this, Republicans are now doing their damnedest Republicans, it seems like in the Senate and Congress, are now doing their damnedest to discredit the FBI as a whole. Now, mind you, Christopher Wray, who is the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump's administration in August. So it's sort of like interesting now that Donald Trump is coming out saying that the Bureau's in tatters, and they had this big thing where they're questioning Wray, these Republicans, on like asking him if he knows individuals in the FBI, apparently that these Republicans have dug up, who are Democrats or seem to be Democrats. I guess you don't know. Maybe they voted Democrat, highly Democrat in their past, but have maybe donated to the Hillary Clinton campaign to try and say there's some, bias. When in large, as we know, Mueller is a voting Republican, as was Comey. And so it's just, again, the Republicans trying to swirl up this messaging in light of what could happen. So they're trying to make these preemptive attacks so that when Mueller finds this, wakes the sleeping dog, right? They can politicize it and make it seem like, well, no, it was always biased towards the Democrats anyway. When in the beginning, if you go to everybody 6 months ago or 4 months ago when they were talking about Mueller, nobody had a bad word to say except for this guy is stand up and he is on the side of the law and truth, and that's it. Democrat, Republican.
Right, absolutely.
And Democrats and Republicans alike.
And he was appointed by one of Trump's own people. I mean, it's just, he's not useful anymore. I mean,
right.
Really,
no, he's not. Well, because he's getting closer. He's very useful. He's very useful if you want the truth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, Trump just wanted to do away with this whole Russian investigation from the very beginning.
From the very beginning. But as it gets closer, I mean, I was talking to my dad the other day, and he was like, this dude is Teflon. And it really sort of like made me like sort of itch and scary, and just, going back to his comments about if I was in the middle of Times Square and shot somebody, I would get off. People would not. But he's made this narrative, and his base really believes that the news media is corrupt and they're out to get him, and they're doing whatever. They will protect him and his, and it's just scary. In lieu of
his whole fan base, I believe.
Right, it's a fan base. It's a cult.
I just think you have a bunch of ostriches, head in the sand kind of thing,
People
and
who
just
had this Kool-Aid and they're drinking it.
So, I mean, I think that what he's saying is, I mean, I don't want to jump the gun. We're going to talk about this later. We're going to talk about this Me Too piece. We're going to talk about sexual harassment, the day of reckoning, and all this. But I think what he articulated is what has basically been the position of powerful, white,
Men.
rich men. And I think that we're having this, I guess, on some level, although not universally, there's this awakening.
Yeah.
But at the highest level, there's
It's not. Yeah.
So,
or in Alabama. Yeah. There's no awakening there.
Yeah. So,
speaking of
harassment. Well, I mean, I think the big news for this week was about the resignations, and so of course we've been talking about the Harvey Weinstein piece.
Yeah.
I think
Matt
last
Lauer.
week we might have talked about Matt Lauer. I don't know if it's so much going on every day,
and so many.
I can't even remember with Matt Lauer this week.
Yeah, and I was here last week when you guys talked about it. Yeah, but Matt Lauer threw me for a loop. I am a Today Show 1,000,000%. That's my where I go. But when they came out and said he was gone, I was watching that morning and I was like, well, you know what? If you bad behavior deserves to be punished immediately and effectively.
And the craziness of it all, we're going to talk about Congress, but even with that, even the messaging or I had the mental image of you come into my office and I have this button that locks the door and you can't get out until I say you can.
Yeah. I'm naked with my penis.
I'm gonna hold you hostage. It's really, I mean.
It's scary. I mean, but as women, come on. So let's be real, because this is Black Women Talk Politics, so we are women. How many times have you been in a situation as a woman feeling uncomfortable with a man of power? And even if it's once, it's too many. And I feel like for us, it starts, we are raised to be, to know that there is going to be a time when somebody's going to approach us in a way that we don't want to be, and they may not take no the first time. That is a fact.
Right. I do think
that's how I have to raise my daughter. And now we have to raise our sons differently.
Yeah, I mean, there is a culture in terms of being a woman of being used to ignoring and rebuffing unwelcome advances.
Always playing defense.
Just looking through people because it's better to look through them because if you make eye contact with them, then they're going to keep talking to you. Yep. So, I mean, I do think that part of this is about denormalizing that experience that has been so normal. And I think it's everywhere, right? Because it's everywhere, and that's why it's popping up, and it seems like it's incredible, but it's because this has been the norm.
Yep.
So, but anyway, and apparently it's been the norm in Congress. But again, we're talking about powerful men, right? With access and honestly, not just powerful white men, So let's just talk about John Conyers, right? So this was really disappointing that he had himself at 88 years old. He's been allegations of sexual harassment, and and he has decided to resign. I think they went from a position last week with everybody saying, "Well, let's look at it," to him making the decision that he did need to resign.
Yep.
He went in the hospital, as a result of I think the stress of it all, and he just said, "Listen, I need to step down," and he. Had been the longest serving congressperson. He had represented Detroit for over 52 years.
He's one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus. Yeah. He was one of the people who started. I mean, so he's done great things, and it's sad that this is where his legacy is going to end and how it's going to end.
And I think that,
but it's also sad for the women that he attacked. So we have to play both sides. I mean, it's you do. We're human, so I feel like we feel for these men who are, and on some level, like we know that they've done good work. And good people do really bad things, but we also have to understand that these women have nothing to gain, and a lot of them have been, attacked by, the men, but then they get attacked again in the media, like, oh, so really, what were you doing? Why are you coming out now? And, all of these questions that have no relevance and shouldn't be asked, we should just be sympathizing with them, especially when, and the fact that the burden of proof lies on them to have to prove that they've been, sexually assaulted or, have some sort of sexual harassment or conduct, thrown at them is another slap in the face.
So we had Conyers resign. We had Al Franken also resign. So Al Franken represented Minnesota.
Yep.
And so he, as we talked about last week, he had this career in comedy before he became a senator. And he, had some just crazy pictures of him with his, looking like he was going to grope women who are sleeping, and just, and he himself as well humbly resigned this week. And I think this was a shock to, John Conyers, I think, was shocking, but then maybe in some level it wasn't so shocking just because of his age and his health.
Right.
And he had been in, he had been in the public spotlight for 52 years. Whereas Al Franken, I don't know if I would have thought he would have resigned. There was some conversation even this morning about, typically what happens is there's an ethics investigation, and then after the ethics investigation, then there's a decision made by individuals or by maybe the party in terms of putting the pressure on about resigning or not. And so there is an element of due process that has kind of been removed. And I can understand from the perspective of men in general that feels a little bit scary.
Yeah.
However, I think with Al Franken, he admitted it, right? He said I've done some things, and I think, but as he was even talking about, he was giving his exit speech or his goodbye speech, but he did talk about the irony of it all,
and
he is leaving office, but Trump is still there, even as I think 13 women came out against him.
And there was a case last week, I think. Yeah,
and he also clearly he made inappropriate remarks on that. What was it? Access Hollywood, right? Tape. So. And I think one thing that happened this week that was pretty funny was, what's the guy's name? Billy
Bush.
Billy Bush, right? So Trump came out and tried to deny.
Or say, was it even really me?
Yeah, like going again with this narrative of fake news. And then Billy Bush came out and was like, yeah, it was you. I was there. And you really said it.
And basically saying, hey, I've lost my whole, because Billy Bush hasn't been seen since, right? He was on the Today Show. He had signed with the Today Show when the tape came out. He was starting to sort of be there and be one of their correspondents. They X'd him. He has not been able to really get a credible job since then. And he says, but yet this guy's in the White House. He said it. And so, come on. We know that Trump has an issue with truth. Like like an 8-year-old boy does. It leaves him whenever he sees fit to make it.
This notion of integrity, I think, is one of the things that we're seeing. Period. But I think that's one of the most disturbing things. I think people are human. People make mistakes. So we have to get past this image of politicians are perfect people. Hollywood starlets are perfect people.
Yeah.
I'm not a perfect person. Neither are you. But I do think that there are, day of reckoning.
Right. Thank you for calling it out.
But I do think that there are certain career paths, unfortunately, that aren't open to all of us. For instance, I can't sing. Unfortunately, no one's coming to see me at the Verizon Center. I don't have that talent. If I was a teacher, right, and I committed certain types of, or if I wanted to be a teacher and I committed certain, so there's just different things depending on what career path you pick. So I guess my point is that.
So if you're sexual harassment, apparently the presidency is open for you, wide.
But nothing else. But apparently nothing else. You can be the president, but you can't be in Congress. Right. Can't be a judge. Can't be a teacher. Can't work in the rec.
You may be able to be in Congress or Senate if you're a Republican.
Well,
we'll talk about that.
Right, because we know. So we had 2 Republicans that came up this week. Flake, who was out of Arizona, and he has resigned.
Well, yeah, because he was just, he was one of the creepier of what I've heard this week. And not that it's not all bad and creepy, but there's certain
creepy.
Things. There are elements. There are definitely levels.
Out by Al Franken acting like he's grabbing this lady's boobs.
Yeah, that was bad. It's all bad. And then touching women. When you put your hands on women, I feel like put your hands on a person. There are lines that are crossed.
But you're saying Flake is creepier because what?
He didn't put his hands on anybody that we know of thus far, but he's asking women to have babies with him, offering to pay them $5 million. His aides, his really pretty cute aides that he's asking, hey, and in all honesty, his wife, they had a surrogate for their first child. This is a conversation that he's saying. They had a surrogate for the first child, but it didn't have any of their DNA. So he wanted a baby that had his DNA. And so how he was going to do it was basically pay these women $5 million to not only sleep with him, but carry his child. which is very, very creepy.
And really, you can go to
you right, you exactly, can get, which is why we know he was paying for sex and not a baby.
Right, really. I was like, the IVF process is much more advanced. You can use your own eggs, your own semen,
and it would be probably a lot less than $5 million
on the petri dish, and you know.
I mean, so there are definitely levels. There are messing with children.
So, but Blake, well, you would think so, but not right. No.
Yeah. So anyway, but go back to Blake.
But Blake Farenthold out of Texas. Now, this to me is crazy. This is cray, right? Because I'm like, not only did this guy have a sexual harassment complaint, he settled it. So he admitted wrongdoing, or
with taxpayer money,
or at least wanted it to go away, and then spent $84,000 of taxpayer money to. Like, how is that? How can my hard-earned? If I lived in Texas, this would be the first. I would get to the bottom of this immediately. How can my hard-earned dollars be used to pay off your inappropriate conduct?
Right.
$84,000.
So that would be like me asking you to pay off my student loans. Yeah, I mean, but
this
even worse.
This would be like
even better, right?
No, you had to do something wrong, like go to
school. Something bad, right?
Yeah, right. And a big time bad thing. $84,000 is a pretty hefty fine. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's not like a $200 parking ticket. That is some serious. There was layers to this thing. Right,
and it was damaging. I mean,
but there's some. So I looked up this young lady today, and so interestingly enough, Mia Love, who I'm only shouting her out because this is Black Women Talk Politics, and Mia Love is from Utah and a Republican and African American, actually Haitian American woman, and so she was on CNN this week, and she was talking about, I have a problem with this law, with the method. Like this is what he did was legal, like using that $84,000. It's legal, and so there's I think it's called Stop. I have to look it up, but there is a mechanism by which politicians can use taxpayer money.
No, it's a fund. There's a fund. It's like it's like the ancillary fund, like this extra overflow money.
I was she was like, to me, that's the ridiculousness of it all. That you can behave badly and get the taxpayers to pay for it. So Mia Love, I'm with you on that, and so I hope you get a lot of traction on your work to make this no longer be legal. But our politicians should be able to dig into their personal pockets and pay for their wrongdoings just like any other citizen. If I do something wrong on my job, please believe I can't borrow $10,000 from the District of Columbia government and pay for my wrongdoing. Or from your
job's kitty, because that's basically what you're doing. But I feel like that's a cry from the women of the Senate. That's part of the cry, is that you need to now pay for your bad behavior out of your own money. And
by first being fired from your job.
First being fired, but he's now, Blake Farenthold now saying that he's going to pay back the $84,000, as if that, does anything to the woman that he harassed. But that's a big part of it, having bad behavior and having zero consequences, because he didn't really have any consequence. I mean, up until now, there was no consequence because he took that money from the said fund, and now it's documented that he did it. But at the time, he thought that was as far as it went. No money out of his pocket. The woman is traumatized. He's still in his place in the Senate. There's been not even a real, you can say a slap on the wrist, but there's been no slap on the wrist to these men for their bad behavior. And this has been a time of reckoning. And I will say that, great segue now into this is the Time magazine. Their person of the year was the Silence Breakers. And I was so excited to see that this week, that they put these women on the cover. And man, Terry, what's his name? He's a comedian, African American, bald. Terry Crews was also part of that. But obviously it's largely women. Who they're on the cover, and they're saying that they are, which was, it was it's a great piece. And I was listening to it on MSNBC, listening to the editor on MSNBC, editor of Times, and why they decided to go with this movement and why they thought it was timely. And obviously because this is all we're talking about, right? And the bad behavior of men, but now putting them aside and using the courage of these women who 9 times out of 10 will be vilified in the media. 9 times out of 10 are still in fear and shock, and have all of the residual effects of being sexually harassed, assaulted, whatever the level is, and have that trauma to deal with, but are courageous enough to say, you know what, with all of that, I need to be a voice for women who are coming behind me. And a lot of it was funny because in our notes, like you said, it's like these women, they're saying that they haven't been silenced. It's just that they're now being heard. And that is so huge, and it's so important. And I hope that more women come out. And even if we all have to be devastated to hear about, some of the people that we really admire. Like I said, with Matt Lauer, I was really, I was shocked. I wasn't surprised. I mean, it is what it is, but I really like him on the news, and now to not have to hear him, or my favorite whoever, or John Conyers, who I respected in the Senate as the top African American in the Senate. But hey, if you're doing these things, you still must go. And so at the sacrifice of whoever, I feel like these women hopefully will have the courage to continue. I feel like if this movement continues, then hopefully every man who is sexually harassed a woman will be punished appropriately, no matter what your party line is. And I think Time Magazine did a great thing with putting them on the cover as the Person of the Year.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of what we're having now is a culture shift as well, because I think that this stuff has been going on forever.
Years.
So, years. Since men and women have been on the earth.
Yes.
So I think, again, it's just denormalizing what has become, when you look at, again, and I'm going to move on to tax reform in a second, but I was reading this article about Harvey Weinstein, for example, and all the people that were complicit in his actions, right? There were layers and layers and layers and layers of people, that, whether they're agents, whether they are co-producers, whether they were his relatives. So it just shows about how the dismissive nature, the complicit nature, and that, people knew all this stuff was going on, and they just were okay with it.
They just,
right. So, I think that's part of what's changing here is, I think there's going to be less complicitness. I think also, as we are seeing, people are going to have to be much more smart. And I don't mean about smart in terms of being aggressive or anything. Right. I'm just saying you have to be thoughtful about what you're doing, how it can be perceived. Is it offensive? Asking permission, all these things that, people have kind of just taken for granted that, I can just, smack your butt and just, or I could just, and like that was the norm.
Yeah.
For many years. And a long time ago, and now everyone would be outraged, So like all these other things that are just normal, they're not normal, they're not okay.
Right.
And so I think that's what the Silence Breakers also is about, just saying, we're going to talk.
Yeah, and hopefully we can have it trickle down to the waitress at the restaurant who, this is her only gig, and the guy who knows that, and she's trying to support her kids. So we have all these high level folks where the women, they can come out and they can expose these high level, but the girl who's, the woman who's, like I said, is the waitress who has so much more to lose, because if she loses this job, things do fall apart. Hopefully they can speak up. Hopefully, every place where there's sexual harassment, people become more culturally competent, culturally aware of their behaviors, and so that it stops. It's not just with these high level people where, people know that they can get, they'll have a recourse because they'll be listened to. I feel like the lower level people who are working lower level jobs, quote unquote lower level jobs, just different types of jobs that don't make as much money, they're a lot more fearful to come out because their repercussions, I feel like, are more immediate to them and detrimental to their livelihood. The college educated woman who's working in the Senate who complains, her chances of getting another job quickly are a lot higher than, the waitress who has a GED who's being harassed.
But I do think this thing has demonstrated that it doesn't matter what,
right, that's what I'm hoping.
Like Gwyneth Paltrow, Reese Witherspoon, you see Lupita, I can't think of her last name.
Yeah.
Right. So it just, in a lot of ways, the decks were stacked against you if you opened your mouth.
Period.
So absolutely. I think that's from the highest level to the lowest level in between. So, All right, moving on, because I know we're going to come back because we got to talk about Roy Moore before we leave.
Yuck.
So, of course, tax reform is still, moving its way along. And so now we're at this point where the House...
I was a little sad about that, but... Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it totally sucked, that the Senate passed their bills. Pretty much everyone voted for except for Corker, whom, no
Thank
one liked.
you.
Unfortunately, he's out of vogue with the rest of his colleagues, so his vote was... They weren't even trying to get his vote. But,
no.
So the main thing I think that you're seeing a lot this week is different pieces of the legislation being discussed amongst different interest groups.
Right.
And, tell the House to vote no for this, tell the Senate to vote no for that. I mean, one of the big things that came out this week was that the corporate tax rate, this whole conversation about it being 20%, and then Trump kind of off the cuff said, well, maybe, 22 or 23. Right. And that sent a lot of people spiraling on the Republican side because, they some people were actually trying to go for like a 15% corporate tax rate.
Yeah.
Right. So, this whole notion of even going up 2 or 3 points but which honestly it needs to go way more than that. Right. But, there's all kinds of charts and tables out there if you go online.
Can my tax rate be 20%, 15%?
Yeah, right. God. If you're a pass-through.
Right.
if you have pass-through income, it can be.
Right.
But there's all these tables to kind of show you, okay, if you're this, you take this. And so here's the gist of it is, it still sucks. The benefits are going to go to, basically, like we said, the top 1%, top 10%. There's going to, again, I continue to remind people not to be tricked by these little short-term breaks that they're going to give you that are going to expire in like 3 years or 5 years, 2023 or 2025, where the corporate tax breaks and the state taxes, those will be going forever.
Right. And not only will they expire, but then you're going to be paying more, right? So not only are they going to expire, not only is the benefit going to expire where you're going to get these tax breaks for the next couple 3 years, but the projection is that it's going to expire and then your taxes are going to go up.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That is
true. So okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that that's what I was hearing, which is because they have to pay for this deficit that is going to be created.
Well, it's part of what they've been talking about, of course, is that they're going to pay for the deficit. Paul Ryan came right out this week and said he's going to cut Social Security and Medicaid, and then he had the nerve. And they say these things. These things are so ridiculous to me as a person who works in the field.
They are not in touch.
But clearly, so they continue to say things like we have welfare programs that pay people not to work. That they not having any concept of what the payment standard really is and how quickly it's exhausted. Yep. So they continue to put out this image of welfare as this, you're living high and fat off your welfare check.
And honestly, the image of welfare, you think of African American single mothers. That's what you think of. That is the image. In fact, in most minds, when largely African Americans are, there are more Caucasian white folks that are on welfare than there are African Americans. And so I feel like they use these dog whistle talking about welfare. The image has always been, what comes to mind is African American, and they've done studies where they've asked people who's on welfare, who consumes more welfare, African Americans or white folks, and they always say African Americans when that is the perception, when that is the lie.
And if we're talking about the Rust Belt, or just going back to Trump's base, and then we're talking about there are a lot of rural families that utilize government entitlement programs, and so then when we're talking about cutting them, you're talking about cutting your own base. And of course, we wouldn't, of course, this is a Republican thing anyway, less government,
right.
Kill the deficit. But the hypocrisy in all this is that their own tax program is going to increase the deficit. And then they come right behind it and say, oh, we have a spending problem, so we have to reduce entitlements. So it's just, it's ironic and also, insulting to our intelligence that, we would somehow get behind decreasing Social Security so that we could give corporations a 15% tax cut. And that's what they're selling. That's the...
And people are buying it. People have bought it. So,
but that's the part. The other part that people have to remember is that Trump himself, when he was out on campaign road, he talked about not cutting spending on Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. And this was one of his big talking points. Yet and still, of course, this was not in line with what the GOP's standard messages. So one of the things that folks can do is, he needs to be held accountable to what he said he wasn't going to do, right? And so, again, there's this convenience of, then again, he did say he was going to create this really big tax cut for the middle class, and then he hasn't done that. So I guess it wouldn't be that much different to say you're not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and then turn around and then do it, because that's pretty much the definition of a liar, say one thing and do the other. So, I wouldn't be as shocked as I think I would be. So, that's basically what's going with that. I say pay attention to the conversations, read the fine print. I know there's been some discussion about Susan Collins maybe being a little bit shaky on her vote.
Yeah.
John McCain. So I don't know how, they voted for it. I don't know, in terms of what, it's really going to, all this kind of side discussions and stuff, but there are people to watch for and hope that they will possibly, make a change in their vote. We need better provisions around the state and local taxes. That's humongous. We need better provisions, and not just us. We talked about this before, and the other blue states, New York, New Jersey,
Absolutely.
Pennsylvania, around these property taxes, all these different mechanisms to bring the deficit down to support corporations by taking away tax breaks from average working Americans. We need to push back on that stuff. So I know you want to talk a little bit too about Jerusalem.
Right. I just thought, because that's such a big, it came up this week because Donald Trump, not that it hadn't been said before, but he made a point to say that he is supporting Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and not making it a dual state where Jerusalem is shared between Israel and Palestine, because they both have interests there. This has caused such disruption in that part of the world, and such fighting, immediate fighting. We are supposed to be the brokers of peace. We're supposed to be there helping, and to pick a side. And we know this president is not educated and is not informed, and he does things because he promised he would on the campaign, things that he has no. And we know that foreign policy, he has no, at least he has proven, and this is one of the ways he's proven it, has no knowledge about. And it's just reckless behavior. And to say you did it because, even I know Tillerson was trying to, earlier in the week, trying to delay him coming out with a statement, trying to delay it because he knew that it was going to cause so much disruption. There's nobody, again, we are out here on an island. No one in the Middle East, from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, everyone has denounced this. Prime ministers of everywhere. There's nobody that is supporting this, not except for maybe the Taliban, because they want this disruption. It's really, or ISIS, or whoever the terrorist group of the week is. But it's very scary that we can, and his rich evangelical donors, who, it's, for the life of me, I can't understand why they have a dog in this fight, but they're excited about it, believing that this is where Jesus is. I don't know. And Kushner, who his family has interests, now we know, in doing this, and him in making this announcement, and Jerusalem becoming the capital. He and his family have vested interests in that. I think it's horribly sad that, again, our president would choose his own interest, or what he feels is right, over what's better for the bigger picture, which is the people of Israel and the people of Palestine, who are trying to make strides at making peace and a dual nation where everyone can share this holy land. And he's taken them 10 steps back, if not 100, because fighting has happened. No one has died as of yet, I don't believe, but there's been fighting for the last 3 days. And it's, I think, inevitable that tragedy is going to happen if they continue launching rockets at each other.
And I had no idea really about why this was significant. I know probably I'm not the only one. So there's a really good article on the New York Times. It talks about, let me see what it says. It says the Jerusalem issue explained in today's Times. And it really just talks about how the U.S. has has supposedly been neutral and trying to work towards peace, understanding that this city has significance to both sides.
It's the holy city, right. And I've been, and it's honestly my favorite place on the planet. And I say this to anybody who knows me. It is. There is something about it that is, it is peaceful. It is. And not even religious, but a spiritual place. You have the Dome of the Rock. You have the whole Wailing Wall. You have the place where supposedly Jesus was crucified. All of these three religions come together at this one point, and to say that only one now can have it is blasphemous. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's,
right, and versus, like you said, trying to help them work through a solution
and that's what everybody else
where they were sharing, and that's how it had been, and it had been tricky, and it had been hard.
Yeah, and nothing has really happened, but that's okay because no violence had happened either. It takes a long time for negotiations to go through, and that's what they're saying. Well, at least he's done something. He's made up. No, what he's done is he's set the negotiations back. I mean, and what you said is that you're giving it to this one, and you're going to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. What? There's no way that peace can come from that. No way. And so that's what he's saying, without saying that he still wants to negotiate peace. There's no way you can do it. It's like I take your car and say, oh, we're going to negotiate you getting it back. What? That it's just, so yeah. I just thought that it was worth mentioning, and just things that we, that think are over there that don't affect us. But, right. It does. When people suffer, we all suffer.
And we always talk about why is it, if a politician is pro-Israel, what does that mean? Yeah. And what does it mean, for relationships and stabilizing the Middle East?
And there's no stability, and that's a part of the world that needs stability and needs at least to be talking about stability. And now those talks are now off the table.
So it's very dangerous, and just something to watch, but. Mm-hmm. Interesting and sad that we just have to go to a stance of dominance, really. Right. That's what that was. One person gets it, one person doesn't. Yeah. Done, and it's not that easy.
No.
So we were going to talk a little bit before we jumped into just the whole Roy Moore and what are the Republicans doing? What's their strategy? What's the Democrats' strategy? Where well the strategy. The strategy for, I guess we're talking about the strategies for the Democrats. When it comes to their reps and members with these sexual harassment allegations, mm-hmm. and the Republicans. And, well, I guess it's been very clear what the Democrats have done. And people have saying that, Al Franken has been the biggest scapegoat. Mm-hmm. And he recognizes it. I mean, it's not lost on him, and he's the sacrificial lamb. But is he really? I mean, he did these things. He said that. And so bad behavior, again, should be punished, and that doesn't mean that he can't come back because he's apologized. I don't feel like people should be, certain crimes are forgivable. I mean, certain crimes, once you've paid your dues, not forgivable, but doesn't mean that you should not be working. You should not be able to have a livelihood. The Republicans are sort of holding their breath, and just largely with especially the Roy Moore piece is let Alabama decide. Let the 90%. I think Alabama's 90% Republican, white Republican. Let them decide his fate. And Democrats have taken a more proactive approach, and people say it's for the cameras, but is it really when you are punishing bad behavior? So I don't know that it's for the. I mean, it might be for the cameras. They might, but the behavior actually was done. Right.
So when you
it's
have,
not like
they're not making things up. No. So when you have, blank, Farrenhold not saying that I'm going to pay the money back, but him not resigning, and there's been no calls from his party for him to resign. It's very troubling, But again, this goes to the top. This goes to the president of the United States, who has several allegations of sexual harassment. He has been known to walk through his pageants where teenage girls are changing and just walk through. And that is harassment. And nothing has happened to him. No slap on the wrist. In fact, he threatens his accusers with lawsuits. So even more disgusting and deplorable.
I think that, to me, too, is part of what I hope happens here, because there's this culture of either we believe the women, mm-hmm. and we try to make things right, whatever, then that looks different for different people.
Absolutely different.
Or this other culture of they're flat out lying.
Yeah.
They did, just basically to villainize and victimize the victim.
Poor me, poor Donald Trump. That 13 women that we know of, because if they're 13, we know they're 30. Be clear, that are not coming out.
Yeah, so I think, and that's what I'm saying. So like, we have this thing where, if you are a Roy Moore supporter, let's say, you have a lot of people saying, I don't believe it. These women are lying. Yeah. Don't you know that woman? She wrote in her yearbook. She wrote the date and the time. So she's lying. It's the whole thing has been altered. Right. And so there's this dismissiveness and an unwillingness to actually and I mean, this is like classic. What you don't want people to do when you're talking to a survivor or when you're talking to a person
that's come out.
Victim blaming and all this stuff. So, what are so when we're talking about the Democratic strategy versus the Republican strategy, I was looking at this poll this morning and they were saying prior to, I guess maybe Trump being elected or during the majority of white women were Republican supporters, and it was like 48% or something like that. And now the number is like 41% of white women. And this is important because we know white women were a major voting bloc for Donald Trump. And so what we see in this is a lot of white women actually that are, vocalizing the sexual aggression that was, put on them by these men, right? So I'm really hopeful that, again, we won't have a bunch of ostriches. We won't have a bunch of people just burying their hands in the sand, particularly women, because at the end of the day, I mean, maybe we still will, but I think that
in Alabama we will.
I think, and
we saw that I saw that this morning when I was watching. They had this town hall and they were talking about Ray. It was Alabama voters for Ray Moore and why, and the women were saying, the left media is lying. These women are lying. And how the Washington Post, they spoke them by name, lying. How you get 9 women to come out who are going to lose everything, who still live in Alabama, who are now, their faces are over everything. People are ostracizing them, threatening them to say that this happened when it didn't, is inconceivable. For you to think that that you're going to go with Ray Moore, the Republican, because honestly, had he been a Democrat, it would have been easy. This would not even be an issue.
Yeah,
a Democrat or a black man, not an issue. But the Republican white man who has a history of not following the law, who's been removed twice, who has a history of being homophobic, racist, talking about the time was good when slavery. Right. I mean, this is Alabama, unfortunately.
But many people in Alabama are saying they don't want this to be how Alabama is known.
Not enough. Not enough. And
I think Tuesdays we're going to see what's going to happen. I'm hopeful for Alabama. I am hopeful for them. I don't know if Doug Jones is going to win.
We can do our pinky swear bet. I'm
not going to take that bet.
I think Roy Moore is winning. And it'll be a sad commentary. And hopefully, if he wins, when he wins, in my opinion, we can have the biggest uproar of anti-Roy Moore that we can do. Honestly, there has to be a backlash if he wins.
They said there's still going to be an ethics investigation.
That means nothing once he's in office. That means nothing. That can go on for years. He's still there.
I guess that's the same investigation that's happening with some of the folks that are there right now.
Yeah, but that can go on for years. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that's not swift justice. So while he's there, he still gets to vote. He still gets all of the 100% luxuries and abilities of somebody who's in the Senate. So him being under investigation does not discount his vote.
Well, the swiftest justice is that the voters don't vote for him. And so, I know Cory Booker and some other people went down there.
That make a difference. Cory Booker.
He went down
in Alabama, not effective.
Well, basically, they're counting on the African American women to come out and vote.
That means nothing. African Americans make up 26% of Alabama's vote. Nothing. I mean, if that means that every African American goes out to vote.
I mean, if it's a total loss, then I don't think it's a total loss because I don't think we would be talking about it.
Right.
If it's
and
just,
it shouldn't be. And we need this.
I understand this. I understand the skepticism, and I'm not even saying it's not realistic or potentially even right. No. But I am saying that, like you said, like if to me, the Me Too movement is about rejecting this philosophy of these women are lying, that we're not going to listen to them. They made it up. That's what Me Too is about. Me Too can't just be about women coming out and saying I was harassed, because women come out and say they're harassed daily. And then everybody just says you're a liar. Yeah. We don't believe you. Then the Me Too movement was a lot of bullshit. Yeah. But if it means that when you come out, I'm going to take you seriously. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to examine your claims to a microscope. Yep. If it happens to not be true, then it'll be rejected. But if it is true, something's going to be done about it. Yeah. That's what Me Too has to be about.
But I don't think it's not gotten to Alabama yet. Well, they have not gotten the Me Too memo.
Yeah, no, I don't think it has gone to Alabama. And you know what? It's not getting to every state. It's just not going to happen in every state. But I think that on a national stage, that's really the question. Because look, we haven't won Alabama since '92. Yeah, so nobody is really counting on Alabama. I mean, but what we are counting on is that there'll be this groundswell of people that will be like, this is not okay.
You don't want to count on Alabama, but you do want to count on Alabama not to be down for pedophiles. I don't want to count on Alabama not to have their Republican who is, just the regular asshat, but the pedophile asshat, that's a different kind of animal. Well, exactly. So I think that's the thing.
Well, I think there's a lot of Alabamans that don't want that either. But like we said, is there enough? Or are they more aligned with, we have to get this Trump machine. The Trump machine. These women are liars. And, I have to say this. If that's how it works out, then you need to get your daughters out of Alabama. Immediately. Because, there's just no, because it's not a safe place for women or children.
So where is the bottom? Where's the bottom, right? If Roy Moore gets in, where's the bottom? If it's
the bottom fell out in 2016.
Yeah, if it's cool to November. Be down with, to be with pedophiles, and that's who you got representing you, then good luck. Good luck to us all.
So, well, that's election December 12th. Will be posted with the pinky bet that I didn't take, but I'm going to still be.
I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to win this.
Yeah, I know.
Winning this for me is losing.
I think if even Doug Jones comes close, a lot of people are saying that's interesting, because there was just absolutely no possibility of
him winning.
Yeah,
or
nothing.
Close.
So at nothing at all.
So we'll see. All right. So now are we going to talk about the hypocrisy of Donald Trump going to the Civil Rights Museum? Which, and I don't defend Donald Trump, but it was a double-edged sword, because had he not gone, baby, but because he was there, it was like, what? It was very interesting. He kept the script.
Well, he actually went to something ahead of the.
Yes, he was.
He wasn't really there. They didn't want him to come to the grand opening because too many people weren't going to come.
Yeah. So and they didn't come, and so John Lewis, who was being honored, that was the biggest honor. Their biggest, did not come, and several. The mayor and the governor. They didn't
come to the invitation only gathering on Saturday. Instead of but they came to the public. They came to the public.
So Friday, Trump was campaigning. Well, he was in Mississippi. He said he wasn't campaigning, but Friday night he was campaigning for Roy Moore. Saturday after that, he went on to still campaign for Roy Moore. And so this is the backlash, right? Because John Lewis has always been, Donald Trump is a racist. He does not have the best interests of African Americans or any minorities, and his racist propaganda and how he got into office, I cannot be down with, and therefore I don't want to be on the same stage or in the same room with him. Solid John Lewis representative, I am down with that and with you, and I had hoped more folks would have done that. I wished that the room was empty with anybody with any backbone and spine. There's nothing to be heard for this man, and because what they were saying is, if he comes, then we can come together and we can have a conversation. The conversation can be open. No, not when the same day you are rallying for Roy Moore, who has said as recently as November 11th, I believe, or in September, that the times were good when we had slavery. Families were together. Whose family? So he is racist, and it's a wonder that the Civil Rights Museum in Mississippi didn't burn down with Donald Trump in it. It's a miracle.
Well, he made this comment, about how civil rights was about ending slavery, or something so stupid. I said, and I said, I've never heard the civil rights movement of the 60s linked to ending slavery of the 1800s. I just, so I was like, who First of all, how dare you come to the Civil Rights Museum and not even really understand what the Civil Rights Movement is about?
Because they don't care to know. It's not important.
Ending slavery and getting off the back of the bus. But dude,
be clear. Earlier in the week when Sarah Sanders, I hate her. Was Sarah? I was gonna say Sarah F.R.B. Sanders, but I don't want to be that crude. That's my name. What I call her when I'm not on the mic. When they were talking about this and how John Lewis wasn't coming, and she was on the podium, and I was listening to her say how it's a shame he's not coming. It's about civil rights leaders, and she was speaking as if she didn't know that he was he is the only living person who was at the March on Washington who spoke on that podium. It's like they are clueless. Like, oh well, he's not coming. I mean, it's a shame he won't be there. No, if he's not there, it's big news. If he's not there, it's big. He's one of the only people who's alive.
He's like featured in the museum,
right? Who's featured, right? For almost dying several times during the civil rights movement. There are not a lot of those people left. So
it's pretty big if he doesn't come.
Right, it's big.
It's like if Martin Luther King was alive and he just chose not to make it.
Right, these are big things that people are not. And they're trying to say, well, then they shut the door on the conversation. No, Donald Trump shuts the door daily with his racist propaganda, his racist conversation. Him being, just him shuts the door. I commend John Lewis and everyone who didn't come. I believe that it was you are better people for it, and you are speaking to inclusion in you not being included in this event. I believe that. So. The irony that you're at this event and then go campaign for Roy Moore is just disgusting and despicable. Yeah, right. And that's why he wasn't there, if you want to know. So,
well, it was a newsy week.
It was a newsy week, and it just continued. I don't think it's going to get any less newsy. We'll see. We did avoid the government shutdown, right?
Well, for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks. So. Well, I think, we've got some really good things to look forward to next week. We've got the Alabama race. Yeah. We have more conversation about the tax bill. And we just have the ridiculous antics of 45.
Yep. That we're going to continue.
To, continue to laugh at usually most of the time.
Or cry at.
Yeah. So, well, all right. Well, I guess that's pretty much it for. Oh, well, do we have any act outs? What are our act outs? I think for me, I'm watching the thing. I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna have CNN on all day long. I'm gonna, probably have some, beverages.
I'm gonna need
snacks,
hard liquor. I'm gonna need vodka straight. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm gonna need something stiff on Tuesday because it's gonna be terrible, possibly. So that'll be that's my act up too, just to be aware and alert for this week's happening, so that next week when we come together, we can either lament or celebrate and be in shock. I mean, maybe we'll be in shock like we were after November 2016, because that's how unlikely I think this is that he won't win.
All right, so that's our act up. We're going to be paying attention to the Alabama election. We're going to continue to track the tax reform legislation for you guys.
And Russia.
We're going to just keep you posted on what's going on and making sure that you're in the loop.
Yep.
And making sure you know who and what to push for in your networks. This is girl power, exemplified. Black women talk politics. And I just appreciate, again, as we're coming to the end of this show and almost the end of the year. I mean, I guess we have to do our reflections, we'll so like when we do the end of the year show and stuff like that. But so I'll put, that'll be my other act up.
Yeah. Yeah, putting together reflections of the year. Oh yeah, that'll be it. How many
do we could do like highlights of the year, like I mean like our top 10 or something. That'd be fun.
Yeah. All right.
Oh well, until next time, this is Black Women Talk Politics. Sheila Clark,
Sabria Williams.
We're out.